You want to hear my critique on your paper?
Yeah. How is it flawed?
Talking with famous people.
It makes a few distinct arguments. One, that humans are fallible, and we shouldn't kill people not being able to retract that action based on the fact that we might be wrong, and this is necessarily the case even if one person has died unjustly. And then it additionally makes the case that Kantian philosophy and divine command theory are disproved by the fact that universally applying a given rule in the case of the death penalty is somehow indicative that universalism as a general principle is bad, and you attack Kantianism not because it allows for the death penalty, which it doesn't, but rather because it's universal, and you attack it on the grounds that it's not particularist, and we just showed that particularism is preferable because the universal rule of law that causes the death penalty to be enacted is somehow an example of universalism, but it's not an example of universalism. And then the divine command theory, you point out hypocrisy of people who believe in God, but they don't ascribe morality to divine command theory. I mean, people who do ascribe morality to divine command theory are probably philosophy people, and to the extent that they do that, they're trying to make a point probably about the fundamentally intuitive nature of morality. That's what we check against, is our gut conscience, and at any rate, the funny thing is both divine command theory and Kantian philosophy disallow the death penalty if they're applied in any sort of meaningful sense. So I don't know why you would attack them while concurrently attacking the death penalty. The other thing is, the real question that needs to be adjudicated is the death penalty morally permissible in instances where we know for sure that the person is guilty? Because that's the only interesting moral question that's there. Obviously, we can't, for practical reasons, successfully implement the death penalty in the status quo. I agree with you for those very practical utilitarian reasons that are not relevant to the Kantian or divine command arguments. But the tough question to ask is, if we know that somebody is guilty, we have video evidence and lots of witnesses, and it's obvious that somebody's the mass murderer, like the guy who shot up all the black people in that church, that white kid in the South, right? The question is it morally permissible for us to use the death penalty in those instances where there's no chance of an innocent person being put to death?
My argument is that you cannot murder someone for the fact that they murdered someone.
Okay, but
murder is the killing of someone against their own will.
Murder is illegal homicide, illegal killing. Okay, intentional illegal killing.
Murdering is the killing of someone against their own will.
No, murder is intentional illegal killing. Homicide is unintentional illegal killing, or in the moment illegal killing. But the point is, the death penalty is not illegal, so it's not murder. Now, negative rights framework provides a good explanation as to what the difference is.
That's why Charlie Manson's still alive.
But look, Charlie Manson didn't kill anybody.
No, he didn't.
He probably shouldn't even be in prison. He didn't really transgress much.
I don't think he should either.
But that's not the point. The point is, Josh, that the challenging question is one of what to do with somebody who has committed mass murder, and should we put them to death? You say, well, to murder them while they are guilty of murder, the irony rushes like a raging river. Well, no, it doesn't, because negative rights framework says responsive violence against somebody who has transgressed against another in so final and absolute a way, it's appropriate that they would forfeit their own rights to life. Now,
I find it illogical that we should murder people for murdering people.
But again, Josh, you're just playing with the word murder. You're choosing to define a state-sponsored killing as murder, even though definitionally it's not, because the distinction between murder and not murder, murderous killing, is one of legal classification.
If you were my professor, what would you grade me?
I mean, I guess I wouldn't give grades because why?
I'm asking you
I would say we need to have this conversation instead of giving you a grade.
because I had to really rail against my philosophy professor to have this subject.
I mean,
Because
I don't believe in grades. I think it's a fine subject, but I think before you wrote instead of having you write a paper, you should have this conversation with me. Would be a lot quicker way to teach you everything there is to learn about it.
When I wrote the paper. I was a young kid.
I know, but look, this is the thing. In college, instead of teaching the way they should do it, they should teach it like debate. They shouldn't say, "Oh, well, let's muse about this." They should say, "Look, here are all the arguments. Learn them all and choose which ones you think are strongest." You know, it's such a better way of teaching everything.
I felt the statistics that I instilled in the paper pretty much.
Okay, but under what framework are they doing things? This is the question, Josh. It's you have.
If one person is killed innocently, then the death penalty is fallible.
Well, the death penalty can't be fallible. That's a reification fallacy. The death penalty isn't a thing that takes action.
Death penalty is not a deterrent. Death penalty.
I didn't say it was. I'm pointing out the fact that the negative rights framework provides the most logical explanation for understanding legitimate and illegitimate use of force. Now, according to the negative rights framework, certain occasions of the death penalty are justified because the individual who has transgressed has forfeited his own right. Now, the thing is, that's the challenge if you really want to attack death penalty, is to overcome that with a preferable alternative of a model or a matrix of understanding what's right and wrong here that is consistent and withstands scrutiny all the way from the bottom up. So technically, my position is, well, the negative rights framework allows for a death penalty in certain circumstances. I think in a different society, in a better society, that I wouldn't have necessarily any moral objection to it. But I agree it's botched in the United States and we shouldn't use it here, but that's not the argument you're making. That's not what the title of the paper is. And what the title of the paper is about content and...
My final assignment was to destroy two...
but you didn't destroy them. You said particularism is preferable to universalism. You didn't address the specific warrants of either Kantianism or of divine command theory. If you wanted to destroy them... Listen, Josh, it would go like this. Kantianism is a failed system because it fails to account for transgression against individuals and consequences thereof. A moral system is just insofar as consequences are commensurate with behavior, and thus Kantianism fails in comparison to the negative rights framework. And divine command theory fails because it's fundamentally unwarranted. It attributes the source of morality not to something like the ownership of one's own body, from which other things can be deduced, but rather from the will of God. We can't objectively determine whether or not the will of God has been accurately described. Therefore, it's a meaningless metric, and therefore divine command theory is pointless. Now, I've just destroyed both of them by actually attacking what they say, not by just saying particularism is better.
I wish I had a way. I wish I was able to describe it just like that whenever I describe it to fucking...
You give me a C, basically.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have let you write the paper without having this conversation first. Because I'd be a good teacher.
I had to argue with my professor in order
He didn't know the arguments. He wasn't able to have this conversation with you because he didn't know anything, because he wasn't a debater.
Well, in fact, I don't know if he was... what's the word? What's the term?
Infected with AIDS?
I proved the text wrong, and he conceded that.
Well, what?
I don't know if he was humoring me, or if he was just trying to shut.
What part of the text do you think you proved wrong?
I don't remember, because it was so long ago.
Okay. Well,
this is a different situation. I was one of those philosophy students who took Adderall before they came to class and tried to destroy everything that the teacher was trying to say.
Right. Okay. Well, let me share with you a story from my philosophy class I took in college. One of them, where the teacher asked at the beginning of the class. He talks about Descartes saying, "I think, therefore I am," and he asked the students, "Any of you can come up with an alternative to existence as an outcome from thought, or can any of you come up with a challenge to this? And nobody could, including me at the time, because I was young and not very bright, and I've gotten smarter as I've gotten older. But what's notable is I don't remember him ever answering the question. That's the crazy thing. This is important. This is insane, the way we teach people shit. What he should have said is, if you want to attack Descartes' position, understand it as one of dualism, that it divides the human experience into thought and physicality. And the fundamental distinction here between metaphysical and physical may be existent, but it doesn't necessarily mean that one causes the other, or that one proves the existence of the other. Now, just because I can't think of an alternative to existence for thought, it just maybe means they're synonymous. They don't even have to be distinct. So
you mean my paper is illogical?
I mean, your paper doesn't prove what it sets out to prove.
I don't believe that.
I explained to you why, because you made the wrong arguments.
I know you explained to me why.
I didn't?
Yeah, he did.
No, I know you.
I understood what he was saying. I mean,
well, I'm going to go over it again because it's worth going over, okay? Let me go over two frameworks called utilitarianism and deontology, and then let me go over how they link to the death penalty.
I'm a Socratic Aristotelian.
Okay, I don't care what you call yourself. I'm talking about the actual arguments that are they're unrelated to labels and expertise and anything else. They're real concrete things that matter. Okay, so utilitarianism and deontology are two philosophies that basically oppose each other. One of them saying we should adjudicate morality through outcomes. The other one saying we should adjudicate it through principle. Deontology is one that says, I'm giving a lecture here, Josh. If you want to participate, a good thing you can do to participate right now is take notes. Okay, so anyway, deontology and utilitarianism work as follows. If you are a utilitarian, you say we can justify behavior's use of force through anticipated outcomes, and that's how much of our public policy is justified, even though it's appalling. We have public policy that does a great deal of harm to people because they assume it's going to produce the outcome of, say, reducing traffic deaths or something. That's a utilitarian framework. A deontological framework, and on the other hand, is a rights-based framework, and it says, look, the state can't act in that fashion and act legitimately because it's not legitimate use of force. And the reason it's not legitimate use of force is because it violates the negative rights, the right against transgression, in other words, the right not to be interfered with, that is implicit to every human being as a direct consequence and a necessary outcome, a necessary state of being that follows logically and unavoidably from the fact that you own your own body. Now, the alternative to affirming the statement that you own your own body is to affirm slavery as a legitimate course of action. If your moral or normative framework legitimizes slavery, my position is that moral framework ought to be discarded. Now, if you want to address this issue in terms of the death penalty, then your approach would be as follows. The two, if you don't like the universalist metrics, but you want to support something that the universalist metrics support, then what you'd have to do is first denounce the universalist metrics as inadequate to deal with the particularism that is implicit in each specific moral instance. And you say, the problem is not that murder or this murder are not or provable or not provable. We know in practice that it's done badly, but we're not here to argue about that today because it's a normative topic. It's what we ought to do, not what we do or what we ought to do. It's not prescriptive, it's normative. A prescriptive topic would say, here's what we do in the status quo, here's how we should do it better. A normative topic says, here's the idea that we do in the status quo, and here's whether or not it's morally acceptable, whether it's morally permissible, whether it's morally impermissible, or whether it's morally obligatory. And so some systems have morally obligatory, some systems have moral obligations that are positive rights, and some systems don't. And whether or not you ascribe to those is going to depend on a utilitarian or deontological basis. But remember, the natural rights framework is derived from deontological thinking, but it does not mirror it exactly because Kant's moral imperative, namely that you cannot treat another you must treat another as an end in himself rather than as a means to an end, precludes things like the death penalty, which are justified by claims of justice rather than by claims of deterrence. As you say, nobody buys the deterrence argument. It's a weak-ass argument. Nobody makes it, so there's no reason to counter it. Additionally, it should be noted that divine command theory is
bullshit.
It's like a Thomas Aquinas era shit, you know? Nobody ascribes to it, and certainly nobody justifies the death penalty with it. If you did, you'd be a philosopher in a class of some sort, just doing it for the fuck of it. or a debater. Debaters might do that. Debaters might pull that shit out and make those arguments. But if you wanted to make those arguments, you'd be doing it for surprise reasons. They're not strong arguments. They don't withstand scrutiny for the reasons I've already articulated, namely that the specifics of the dividing command can't be determined objectively with any level of agreement, consensus enough even to assume it for argumentation's sake. So as a consequence, that's how you would address the topic if you were to address the two things as linked, namely, let's talk about universalist metrics and the death penalty. Then if you wanted to discount the universalist metrics and prefer the particularist approach, you'd have to say these universalist metrics, even though they oppose the death penalty for the wrong reasons. And here are preferable reasons, and they are particularist rather than either deontological or utilitarian. Or you could go straight util and say, all right, well, we're going to base it on outcomes, and this is why we shouldn't do it. Pure outcomes bad, and we shouldn't favor the deontological frameworks for the following reasons. Prefer our framework arguments need to be made at that point. Why ought we prefer one framework over the other is the only core issue that matters in that particular argumentation chain, really, especially since you spend so much time talking about utilitarian warrants without linking back to a utilitarian framework.
It's a shame that the bot isn't in here recording this.
I'm recording it. It's fine. I knew I was going to go put on a little show there, so I went ahead and pushed record.
Oh, good.
Because you got me in my wheelhouse here,
okay.
Josh. I appreciate the softballs down the middle of the plate, because this really is, I mean, I've argued these topics on every fraction of argumentation chain, all up and down both coastlines of utilitarianism and deontology, natural rights, negative rights, the whole shebang. So it's right in my wheelhouse.
Well, I appreciate your critique of my 2001 21-year-old paper.
It turned out to be a lot more fun than I thought.
Really?
I didn't think it would be fun to read an old paper that I knew was going to be poorly argued, because you're not a debater. But I did find it fun because it gave me something to go about, which is all like my favorite thing in the world to do.
Well, I truly believed in that paper, and I had to argue with my philosophy professor in order to
Talking with famous people.
Well, I appreciate your passion, Josh. I appreciate your passion, and I lament alongside you your professor's incompetence. After all, he wasn't a debater. He didn't know what the fuck he was doing.